The Bible contains descriptions of numerous celestial beings that have captivated many throughout history. Among these are the 24 elders, whose existence is beyond our usual realms of understanding and perception. In a resplendent throne room in heaven, bathed in divine light and authority, the ultimate authority of the universe holds court. The tale of John's exile to the island of Patmos, where he experienced profound visions, including that of the 24 elders, remains one of the most fascinating accounts recorded in the scriptures. These elders, forming a circle around the central throne, are distinct figures garbed in white and adorned with golden crowns, seated on thrones themselves. John's narrative continues as he describes being transported directly into God's celestial throne room after delivering messages to the 7 churches. There, he witnessed God on his throne, which shimmered like gemstones. Surrounding this central throne were 24 additional thrones occupied by the elders, arrayed in white garments and golden crowns. In this video, we delve into the enigmatic entities documented within the Bible. I encourage you to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and stay tuned until the end. In a moment of reverence, the elders and 4 living creatures around the throne fell prostrate before God, laying down their crowns and proclaiming, "You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory, honor, and power, for through your will everything was formed and has its being." Revelation 4:1. In the book of Revelation, the specific identities of the 24 elders are not revealed. Nevertheless, there's a strong argument to be made that they represent the church rather than angelic beings, as some might suggest. The significant indicator of their role is their position on thrones, suggesting they co-reign with Christ, a privilege consistently associated with the church, which is said to rule and reign alongside him. The term elders, derived from the Greek word used in these passages, specifically refers to mature men known for their ability to govern, rather than to angels who do not age, and thus would not be termed as elders. Moreover, while angels are sometimes depicted in white, the color is more commonly linked to believers. White symbolizes the righteousness of Christ bestowed upon believers through salvation. The presence of golden crowns worn by the elders further supports the view that they are not angelic. Angels are not described as wearing crowns in scriptures. Additionally, the cherubim, or living creatures, continually worship God, inspiring the 24 elders to participate in adoration. The elders are envisioned as delegates of God's followers, particularly reminiscent of figures in the Old Testament. They wear crowns of triumph and reside in the heavenly realm prepared by their Redeemer. Number 2. The wheels. In the Old Testament, angels are frequently mentioned, appearing 108 times in the book of Exodus alone. Moses also encountered angels during his wanderings in the desert. A particularly intriguing aspect of biblical descriptions involves the wheels. The Hebrew term for wheel refers to ordinary wheels, but it takes on a special significance when linked to the wheels seen in Ezekiel's vision of God's throne. This divine revelation occurred when God momentarily opened the heavens to Ezekiel. This inaugural vision of Ezekiel is one of the Old Testament's most difficult texts to interpret. Ezekiel starts by describing where he was when the vision came to him, employing similes and comparisons to express experiences that defy straightforward description. He witnesses a menacing cloud charged with lightning and fire advancing from the north, within which shone 4 radiant beings. Before the wheels, Ezekiel first encountered creatures known as cherubim. Following this, he saw the wheels, reminiscent of a chariot's, yet their function and movement were more akin to that of a gyroscope, able to move in any direction without turning. Consider that Ezekiel was tasked with conveying the inconceivable. "As I observed the beings, There was a wheel on the ground next to each of the 4 creatures. The wheels shimmered like bright topaz, and all 4 shared the same design. They looked as though one wheel were within another. They moved in any of the 4 directions they faced, without needing to turn. The rims were tall and awe-inspiring, and all around the rims were eyes. When the beings moved, the wheels moved with them. When the beings ascended, the wheels also lifted off. They followed wherever the spirit intended to go, for the spirit of these creatures was within the wheels. They moved as one. When the creatures moved, the wheels moved. When they halted, the wheels halted. When they ascended, the wheels ascended, driven by the spirit within. Ezekiel found himself amidst these wheels and cherubim. As the cherubim moved, so did the wheels. He noted that the Spirit of God was present in all these movements. Ezekiel also recognized God's all-seeing nature. The numerous eyes he described symbolized God's complete awareness, omnipresent in his vision of everything. This remarkable narrative opens with Ezekiel's vision, where he is called by God to serve as a prophet and guardian for the Jewish exiles. This is the first of 4 visions in the text, which introduces the complexity of visualizing and interpreting what Ezekiel experienced. The remarkable intelligence and perception of the Ophanim are highlighted similarly in Ezekiel 10. Ezekiel was made to comprehend that the divine chariot, or the throne chariot of God, was not stationary but in constant movement. To a contemporary reader, such imagery might seem outlandish, yet it's essential to understand that these are visions where surreal elements often overshadow literal interpretations. Picture the intense scenario of a massive 5-ton African elephant charging at you, its trunk extended, eyes wide and fierce, thundering across the ground. Imagine the sheer vastness of the plains with nothing but flat grass between you and this behemoth, your heart racing with fear. How would you react? What actions would you take? Consider that creatures even more daunting and mighty than the African elephant once existed on Earth. In the book of Job, one such creature, the behemoth, is depicted as a colossal beast. The story begins with a wealthy man named Job, who lived in Uz with his large family and numerous livestock. He was a man of integrity and moral fortitude, consistently seeking to lead a virtuous life in close relationship with God. Praising Job's virtues, God presents him as a model to Satan. However, Satan contends that Job's righteousness is merely a byproduct of divine favor. He proposes a test. If allowed to afflict Job with suffering, he predicts Job will renounce his faith. God permits Satan to test Job, though sparing his life to see if his faith withstands adversity. In a single day, Job receives devastating news through 4 messengers. His livestock, servants, and 10 children have all perished due to raids, theft, or natural calamities. Despite his immense grief, Job mourns by tearing his clothes and shaving his head, yet he continues to honor God in his prayers. Satan returns to heaven, where God offers him a further opportunity to test Job's character. Amid his trials, Job curses the day of his birth, comparing life and death to light and darkness, lamenting his very existence. He questions the value of life, which seems only to increase his suffering, and ponders why God judges human actions when he can effortlessly alter or forgive them. Job struggles with the concept of meeting God's standards of justice, considering the divine ways mysterious and unfathomable. Pushed to his limits by these hardships, Job grows resentful, anxious, and fearful. He decries what he sees as God's injustice, letting the wicked thrive while he and other righteous individuals endure hardships. Desperate for answers, Job wishes to challenge God directly, but finds it impossible to approach him. Nevertheless, he resolves to seek wisdom, maintain his reverence for God, and shun evil. Ultimately, God intervenes, Job had repeatedly called upon God to speak with him, and during a tumultuous storm, God finally addresses him. God's response is tinged with irony as he questions Job, reminding him of his role as the omnipotent creator. He details his acts of creation and maintenance of the universe, questioning Job if he could ever hope to emulate such feats. He concludes by questioning Job's understanding of justice, highlighting the presumption in expecting God to justify his actions. Feeling overwhelmed and humbled, Job replies, "I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I have spoken once, I will not answer. Twice, but I will say no more." This acknowledgement marks a turning point for Job, recognizing the vast gap between human understanding and divine wisdom. In this next exchange, God shifts the conversation from his role as creator to the wonders of his creations, infusing the dialogue with a sense of humor. He directs Job's attention to the behemoth, questioning him as if the secrets to life's significant mysteries were embedded in these extraordinary creatures. "Observe the behemoth, which I crafted just as I did you. It grazes like an ox. Note its formidable strength in its hips and the powerful muscles in its belly. Its tail sways like a cedar. The tendons of its thighs are tightly bound. Its bones are sturdy as tubes of bronze, its limbs strong as bars of iron. It ranks as the foremost of my creations. Only its creator can confront it safely." Previously, the emphasis was on the enigmatic nature of animal creation, but now the focus is on awe and the sheer magnificence of God's works. The true nature of the behemoth has been a topic of much speculation among scholars for ages. Despite ongoing debates in the academic world about various attributes of this creature, two things are certain. It was enormous and possessed a navel, indicating it was not hatched from an egg. It consumed grass like an ox, with its strength centered in its abdominal muscles. God takes evident pleasure in depicting this incredible being, highlighting its size, diet, and behavior. This portrayal serves to emphasize the point. If Job cannot measure up to one of his fellow creatures, how could he ever hope to rival the God who created the behemoth? The term behemoth in Hebrew mirrors the plural form of bema, translating to beast. It is conceivable that such a creature once shared the earth with humans. Was the behemoth a hippopotamus? Many scholars believe that the biblical reference to behemoth likely points to what we today recognize as the hippopotamus, one of the largest and most formidable land mammals known to man. This creature was well known during biblical times, particularly in Egypt. The Romans notably reduced their numbers due to the destruction they wreaked on farmland. Despite being commonly known as a river horse, the hippopotamus is actually more genetically akin to pigs than to horses. The impressive sight of a hippopotamus with its jaws wide open is striking. Alternatively, could the behemoth have been an elephant? Many experts on biblical texts argue that the Hebrew term behemoth indicates a four-legged animal, which they suggest could be an elephant. Those who support the hippopotamus theory may disagree. Yet considering Job 40:23, which describes the creature consuming vast quantities of water from the Jordan River with its immense mouth, the beast depicted in the book of Job was clearly too formidable for people of that era to conquer. These characterizations do not match any known animal today. Throughout history, humans have hunted elephants, utilizing them for tasks such as labor and combat. In the book of Job, when the behemoth is described as the pinnacle of God's creations, so mighty that only its creator could approach it with a sword, it underscores its remarkable nature. Compared to the formidable, uncontrollable Leviathan, the behemoth's description serves to highlight human modesty before God's majesty. This serves as a reminder that human achievements and pride pale in comparison to the wonders of God's creations. This narrative emphasizes that neither Job nor anyone else has the authority to question the workings of God. The Leviathan is depicted in the Bible as a massive water-dwelling entity characterized by its overwhelming ferocity and formidable strength. The Hebrew term for Leviathan stems from the root meaning coiled or twisted. Isaiah 27:1 refers to this creature as a formidable serpentine beast, stating, "On that day, the Lord with his strong and mighty sword will punish Leviathan, the swift serpent, Leviathan, the coiling serpent, and he will slay the sea dragon." The Leviathan's reputation as a powerful and wild sea monster was well established. Celebrated by God, the Leviathan features prominently in the Old Testament. Most references suggest it was a known creature, though more by fearsome reputation than direct observation. Psalm 104:25-26 extols God for creating a dwelling for the Leviathan, illustrating the sea beast's significant place in the divine creation. To address Job's overly grand view of himself, God used the example of the Leviathan to illustrate just how insignificant Job was in the broader universe. Job 41 provides extensive details about the Leviathan as a tangible marine beast. Here, God highlights the creature's immense size, power, and fierceness, underscoring its status as a marvel of his creation. Job 41:1-5 questions whether one could possibly control the Leviathan using simple fishing techniques. Can you catch Leviathan with a fish hook or secure its tongue with a rope? Can you thread a cord through its nose or fasten a hook into its jaw? Will it plead for mercy and speak softly to you? Will it strike a deal with you to become your lifelong servant? Can you treat it like a pet bird or leash it for your young daughters? This reference underscores the creature's immense power and untamable nature. The first mention of Leviathan occurs in Job 3:8, where it's noted, "May those who curse days invoke those skilled at stirring Leviathan." This alludes to sailors and fishermen who would curse the Leviathan, a feared sea creature similar to how Job, overwhelmed by his misfortunes, curses his own birth. Traditionally, the Leviathan is seen as a mythical sea monster or dragon, known for instilling fear in sailors and fishermen. However, within the narrative of Job 41, God's dialogue suggests that he does not regard the Leviathan as merely mythical. There is a spectrum of interpretations about Leviathan's identity. Some propose it could be a prehistoric creature akin to a dragon that lingered into the era of Job, existing in collective memory and used by God as an illustrative figure. Others argue that the Leviathan might simply be a formidable crocodile. In this passage, God aims to show Job his relative insignificance and vulnerability in the face of such a mighty creature, emphasizing that Job, despite his efforts, could not hope to control or challenge the powerful Leviathan. The cherubim are celestial beings created by God and hold a prominent position in the hierarchy of angels as described in the Bible. They make their first biblical appearance soon after the pivotal moment when Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden. This event is detailed in Genesis 3, following Adam and Eve's disobedience by eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Their expulsion was to prevent them from also eating from the tree of life, which would grant them eternal life. To ensure that Adam and Eve could not return and access the tree of life, a measure was taken as described in Genesis 3:24. Therefore, God expelled them from paradise and stationed at the east of the Garden of Eden the cherubim, along with a revolving, flaming sword to guard the path to the tree of life. From these biblical references, the primary role of the cherubim appears to be to emphasize human sinfulness and safeguard the sanctity of God's presence from the impurity of sin. Despite Adam's possible desire to return to the Garden of Eden, the presence of the cherubim served as a constant reminder of his transgression against God's commandment. Similarly, the high priest of Israel, who was permitted to enter the Holy of Holies once a year and approach the mercy seat, was likely overwhelmed by a profound sense of unworthiness, thinking, "I do not belong here in the holy presence of God, for I am a sinner." Cherubim are depicted not only as real and powerful entities, but also as symbolic representations of celestial realities. They were specifically included in the designs of the Ark of the Covenant and the Tabernacle at God's instruction. In Ezekiel 10, the cherubim are described as beings with wings and hands, covered in eyes, and accompanied by intricate wheels within wheels. This chapter, while somber, highlights that the cherubim's role extends beyond guarding the most sacred spaces from the undeserving. They also affirm the right of the high priest to enter these holy places, bearing the blood required for mediation between God and the people. Furthermore, the cherubim symbolize the accessibility to God's throne, reassured by the humility of Christians. This access was dramatically illustrated when Christ's sacrifice tore the temple's veil, signifying that the barriers between God and humanity were removed. In Isaiah 14, we are introduced to a figure known as Lucifer, meaning light bringer in Latin and translated as morning star in Hebrew. This figure is described across languages as a luminous and majestic being, further enriching the complex tapestry of biblical angelology and theology. Let's delve into the intriguing figure of Melchizedek, a unique and mysterious character found in the Bible. He appears during the era of Abraham, cloaked in enigma right from his introduction. The very name Melchizedek evokes a sense of mystery. His presence in the scriptures is subtle yet significant, raising questions about his identity and the extensive discussions surrounding him. Notably, he is referenced in both the Old and New Testaments. The narrative then shifts to Abraham, from whom we learn the profound significance of names in the Hebrew tradition. Unlike merely descriptive tags, names in the Bible often encapsulate authority and deeper meanings. For instance, Adam's name, which means "from the earth," reflects his creation from the soil. Similarly, names can signify the roles individuals play within the biblical stories, such as Nabal, whose name translates to fool and aptly describes his character. Names might also embody human aspirations, divine messages, or even prophetic symbols. Focusing on Melchizedek's name, we find its interpretation particularly enlightening in Hebrews 7:2, where it means King of Righteousness or the King is righteous. This title suggests that Melchizedek was a just and moral leader, emblematic of a ruler who champions fairness and virtue in his domain. The narrative links Melchizedek with Jesus, portraying both as kings of peace. This comparison extends into the prophecies, such as those by Isaiah regarding the Messiah. Additionally, we learn from Genesis 14 that Melchizedek greeted Abraham with bread and wine, further cementing his role and significance within the biblical texts. Genesis 14:18 introduces Melchizedek as the priest of the Most High God, indicating he served the supreme deity worshipped by Abraham, the only God recognized as the Most High, superior to all other gods. This reveals that Melchizedek's priesthood predates that of Aaron and the Levitical priests. He is depicted blessing Abraham in the name of this supreme deity and acknowledging that the Most High God enabled Abraham to vanquish his foes. The character of Melchizedek is shrouded in mystery, particularly because the scriptures neither assign him a beginning nor an end. His priesthood is described as eternal, destined to last until the end of time. In the New Testament, particularly in the book of Hebrews, Melchizedek is discussed extensively. Hebrews 6:20 highlights how Jesus, akin to Melchizedek, entered as a precursor for us, taking on an everlasting priesthood by the order of Melchizedek. Hebrews 7 delves deeper into Melchizedek's life, especially focusing on his encounter with Abraham. It states, "For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, met Abraham as he returned from defeating the kings and blessed him. To Melchizedek, Abraham apportioned a tenth of everything. His name first means king of righteousness, then also king of Salem, meaning king of peace. Without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, resembling the Son of God, he remains a priest forever." This passage encapsulates the enigmatic and eternal nature of Melchizedek, comparing him directly to the Son of God, thereby elevating his status to a perpetual priesthood. Reflect on the stature of Melchizedek, to whom even Abraham, the revered patriarch and father of the Israelites, paid a tenth of his battle spoils. Despite Abraham's prominent status as a key figure among God's chosen people, he recognized Melchizedek's authority by offering him a portion of the spoils. This act underscores Melchizedek's remarkable standing, as even Abraham, a man of great importance, honored him. Verse 3 deepens the mystery surrounding Melchizedek by stating he had no parents, no lineage, nor a record of his birth or death. This absence of a personal history emphasizes his resemblance to the Son of God, suggesting that Melchizedek serves as a precursor to a greater priesthood embodied by Jesus. Furthermore, Melchizedek's city, known as the City of Peace, symbolically aligns with the peace that Jesus, the Lord, brought forth. Abraham's act of giving a tenth of his spoils to Melchizedek signifies his recognition and respect for Melchizedek's priestly role. The scriptures also hint at Abraham being a precursor to the Levitical priesthood that would later emerge, drawing parallels between his actions and the forthcoming religious order. Additionally, the narrative of the angel of death in Exodus sheds light on divine retribution. This angel, distinct from the general concept of an angel of death, was God's instrument during the final and most severe of the plagues sent to the Egyptians, because they would not free the enslaved Israelites. This plague marked a pivotal event in the Exodus story, highlighting the drastic measures taken to liberate God's people. The Lord conveyed to Moses his plans for a final affliction upon Pharaoh and Egypt, declaring that it would prompt Pharaoh to not only release the Israelites, but to urgently expel them altogether. Moses was instructed to tell the Israelites to borrow silver and gold items from their Egyptian neighbors. Moses then approached Pharaoh for one last discussion, explaining, "Thus declares the Lord, at midnight I will move through Egypt, and every firstborn in Egypt will perish, from Pharaoh's heir apparent to the lowliest slave girl at the mill, and even the livestock will not be spared." Despite Egypt's history of enduring 9 previous plagues, the impending calamity was unprecedented in its grief. Unlike before, the Hebrews would be untouched due to their obedience to God's command. God promised a night of divine judgment where the houses marked with lamb's blood would be passed over, sparing the inhabitants from this plague. On that fateful night, bolstered by their faith in God's messenger, the Israelites complied, marking their doors as instructed. As the night unfolded, it became evident that Pharaoh's refusal to heed warnings subjected his nation to severe divine judgment. This was a night of wakefulness and dread, marking a pivotal moment in history as described in the scriptures, Exodus 12:29-30. At the stroke of midnight, the Lord executed his final devastating act upon Egypt, claiming the life of every firstborn from Pharaoh's heir to the lowliest captive in the dungeon, including the firstborn of the cattle. As darkness enveloped the land, Pharaoh, his servants, and all Egyptians awoke to a nightmare of unimaginable sorrow. The wails of mourning filled the air as there was not a single household spared from death. The angel tasked with this grim duty showed no mercy to those unshielded by God's command. This night was a profound demonstration of God's promise fulfilled, as the angel of destruction bypassed the homes of the Israelites, leaving them untouched by the pervasive death that afflicted their oppressors. It's difficult to fully grasp the scale of that night's terror and mourning as the Israelites walked freely toward freedom, their path lit only by the cries of grief from the Egyptians. The term angel of death, often synonymous with the destroying angel, appears across various scriptural accounts to describe the divine agents of God's judgment. Biblical references to such angels don't pinpoint a singular entity, but rather a force of destruction executing God's will. Notably, the Hebrew texts do not always specify an angel in these narratives, as seen in Exodus 12:23, where the destroyer is described merely as the agent of destruction. Psalm 78 further elaborates on the plagues of Egypt, attributing them to a force of destroying angels, using the general Hebrew term for angel, indicating a divine execution rather than a specific individual. God also dispatched a devastating angel, a heavenly envoy, to deliver judgment on the Israelites due to David's transgression of conducting a census of the population. From that morning until the designated time ended, the Lord unleashed a plague across Israel, claiming the lives of 70,000 individuals. As the angel prepared to demolish Jerusalem, the Lord reconsidered the calamity and commanded the angel tormenting the populace, "Stop, withdraw your hand." At that moment, the angel of the Lord stood at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. Upon witnessing the angel's harsh actions towards the people, David confessed to the Lord, "I have sinned." What are seraphim? Seraphim are celestial beings created by God for the purpose of service and adoration. These entities, equipped with 6 wings, are perpetually in the presence of God's throne. The prophet Isaiah informs us that the seraphim are 6-winged fiery angels who encircle God as he presides over his majestic throne and continuously exalt him, Isaiah 6. They also fulfill roles in ministering to the Lord and act as his instruments of purification, as shown by the removal of Isaiah's sins prior to starting his prophetic duties. The word seraphim is mentioned exclusively in Isaiah chapter 6, where Isaiah vividly depicts his encounter with God's divine assembly. Here, the prophet specifically observed God enthroned, attended by flying beings known as seraphim. These angels exude a sense of joy in their divine service. Notably, Isaiah portrays them with human-like features such as faces, hands, and voices, Isaiah 61:2. During the year King Uzziah died, I beheld the Lord sitting upon a throne, lofty and magnificent, and the train of his robe swelled to fill the temple. Positioned above him were the seraphim, each possessed 6 wings. They used 2 to shield their faces, 2 to cover their feet, and 2 to soar. These angels may manifest as blazing entities. The name seraphim originates from the Hebrew verb saraph, which means to burn with fire, or more precisely, to consume with fire. This designation may also reflect the role of the seraphim as purifiers. God fashioned the seraphim as beings devoid of sin, though they are distinct from God. The significance of their closeness to God, coupled with their exultant worship, should not be overlooked. When the seraphim proclaim, "The whole earth is replete with his glory," they are providing direct testimony from the pinnacle of the celestial sphere. From the seraphim's divine vantage, it is clear that God's glory is boundless, beyond measure, and so potent that it transcends all spatial limits. His splendor not only permeates heaven, but also extends across the spiritual domain and floods the entire earth. This display of divine glory offers us a glimpse into the nature of a holy God. To be holy is to be unique and worthy of profound respect. The term holy is used 3 times in succession to describe God's sanctity, a pattern found only twice in the Bible, each instance proclaimed by angels. If someone is transported in a vision to God's throne, and even the pure, holy seraphim exhibit such deep reverence in his presence, then how much more should we, who are flawed beings, approach him with humility? The angels' deep respect for God serves as a reminder of our own presumptuousness when we carelessly enter his presence, often due to our lack of understanding of his holiness. In Revelation 4, John's vision of God's throne echoes Isaiah's experience, marked by similar reverence and awe. The creatures surrounding the throne continuously cry out, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty." Additionally, the seraphim both minister to God and act as his agents of purification. When Isaiah saw that even the celestial seraphim covered themselves before God, acknowledging their unworthiness, he became acutely aware of his own sins and feared for his life. At that moment, a seraph approached with a live coal taken from the altar using tongs, placed it on Isaiah's lips, and declared that his guilt was removed and his sins forgiven. This act underscores that demons are individual entities with personal characteristics. Both Christ and the demons referred to themselves using personal pronouns like I, me, and yours. It was the demonic spirit inside the possessed man, not the man himself, that caused the possession. Demonic possession involves a spirit inhabiting a human body and expressing its own personality traits through the host's actions. Engaging in seemingly benign activities related to occultism, spiritism, and similar practices can expose believers to deception and put unbelievers at genuine risk of demonic influence. People are often drawn to occult or demonic activities because they appear to be effective. However, the efficacy attributed to these practices is not due to the actions themselves, but to the agency of demonic spirits. Demons seek to inhabit bodies much like a vandal desires a spray can. They use the body as a tool to wage war against God. They also target humans because they loathe God's image in mankind, attempting to mar that image and render the individual detestable. While demons aim to corrupt God's image in all humans, their strategies are somewhat constrained when it comes to Christians. The power of demonic spirits over Christians was curtailed by the work of Jesus on the cross. They can still deceive Christians, leading them into disbelief, but their influence is limited. Demons also possess personal names, as evidenced when Jesus confronted one, asking, "What is your name?" Luke 8:30. Jesus likely inquired about the demon's name to grasp the extent of the issue, recognizing that the man was possessed by multiple demons, not just a singular entity. It's important to note that legion is not truly a name, but rather an evasive, threatening response indicating the presence of many demons. The ability to communicate through speech reflects personality. The demons engaged in conversation with Christ, and he with them. They pleaded with him not to banish them into the abyss, a deep, bottomless pit mentioned in Revelation 9:1, which serves as a holding area for certain demonic entities. The demons exhibited volition, appealing to Christ not to be cast into the abyss, but rather to be permitted to enter a herd of pigs. This illustrates Christ's supreme authority, demanding obedience to his will over theirs. Demons also display intelligence. They recognized Jesus as the Lord and were aware of Paul's ministry, which led to an encounter with a slave girl possessing a spirit that enabled her to perform divination. Acts 16:16-17. Demons are entirely spiritual beings, without any physical form, belonging to the spiritual realm, manifesting solely through the disturbances they create. The Bible also mentions varying degrees of malevolence among demons. Some are more evil than others. Jesus, through his actions of casting out demons, demonstrated his authority over these evil forces. He liberated those oppressed by Satan, thus disrupting and plundering Satan's domain. Number 10. The figure known as Lucifer is mentioned in Isaiah 14. Derived from Latin, Lucifer means light bringer, and in Hebrew it translates to morning star. Regardless of the language, Lucifer is described as a luminous, bright and majestic being, a high-ranking angel. In the hierarchy of heavenly beings, Lucifer stood as a chief angel alongside Michael and Gabriel within God's celestial hosts. However, Lucifer made a critical error by choosing to defy God. As recounted in Luke 10:18, Jesus observed, "I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning." Known as a master of slander and defamation, Lucifer persistently attempts to subvert the various authorities that God has established, affecting both the church and the secular world. Following his expulsion from heaven, Lucifer's rebellion did not cease. Instead, he endeavored to form his own dominion in direct opposition to God's. It was pride, stemming from his own beauty, that led to Lucifer being cast out from the Mount of God. The root of Lucifer's downfall? Pride. This sin, committed not on earth but in heaven, was the original transgression. It wasn't a case of drunkenness, adultery, or even falsehood. It was pride, a vice that remains the most perilous of all. Many devout individuals might never consider committing overt sins like adultery or drunkenness, yet they fall prey to pride without realizing its damaging effects. Lucifer's beauty was so great that he became enamored with himself. His vanity was the catalyst that turned him from Lucifer into Satan. Though God had endowed Lucifer with power, authority, beauty, and wisdom, Lucifer's misguided attitude transformed these blessings into tools of his own ruin. It's startling to recognize that even today, men and women called and equipped by God can fall into the same fatal error that Lucifer made. Isaiah 14:12-15 delves into the motives behind Lucifer's defiance. He aspired to match God's status, believing himself so intelligent, beautiful, and grand that he thought, "I could be God." Scripture indicates that Lucifer swayed a third of God's angels to join his mutiny and subsequent downfall. Scholars widely accept that Lucifer orchestrated worship in heaven, possessing unparalleled musical talents that he continues to exploit to beguile people today. As the custodian of God's sanctuary, he oversaw the celestial worship services. He was the cherub appointed to oversee the area where God's presence was revealed. Skilled in music and the arts, his success was profound until his rebellion led to his fall. Pride set the stage for conflict. Lucifer was cast out from the presence of God after he became conceited about his wisdom and beauty and plotted his rebellion. Along with him, his deceitful angels were also expelled. Despite being possibly the wisest and most beautiful of all God's creations, the scriptures indicate that Lucifer's pride swelled within him, precipitating his internal decline before his eventual downfall. In response, Satan, the fallen angel and adversary of both God and humanity, mounted a counter-offensive. His animosity towards humans stems from two main reasons. Firstly, by targeting humans, he strikes at the very representation of God on earth, since humans embody God's image to the rest of creation. Unable to harm God directly, Satan focuses his assaults on this divine likeness in humanity. He relishes in defiling, destroying, and humiliating this image, tirelessly dedicating himself to this malevolent goal. Satan's efforts are aimed at distorting and tarnishing God's image in humans, making efforts to degrade both their physical presence and their moral and spiritual essence. Satan harbors a particular loathing for Christians because it is through them that the image of God is restored and mirrored in the world. His tactics involve attempting to corrupt and derail Christians from their spiritual journey, striving to weaken their faith and undermine their witness. Following Satan's rebellion, God actively intervened by sending Jesus Christ, who perfectly embodies his essence, to redeem and restore humanity. Christ's life, death, and resurrection offer salvation and the chance for us to be reshaped into his image. This reshaping is an ongoing journey in a Christian's life, progressively conforming us to Christ as we adhere to the Holy Spirit and Christ's teachings. In doing this, we more vividly reflect God's image, bringing his light and truth to a world in dire need. Satan, recognizing he cannot defeat God, unleashes his rage and deceit on humanity, attempting to lead them away from God and the truth of the gospel. Nonetheless, ultimate victory is assured by God. Through the sacrifice of Christ on the cross, Satan's defeat was sealed. Those who trust in Christ are guaranteed eternal life and full restoration to God's likeness. This perpetual struggle between good and evil, God and Satan, is a pivotal element of the biblical story, emphasizing the need to remain loyal to God and resist Satan's temptations and lies. With Christ, we are assured victory and the promise of a magnificent eternity with God. I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this content helpful, please support me by subscribing, liking this video, and clicking on one of the 2 videos that will appear next to continue your viewing. Together, we can broaden our understanding and illuminate more minds. Thank you for joining me today. Until we meet again, may light guide your way.